This is for the grammar stream students who didn't come into school this week. We're going to go over the chemistry of the atmosphere topic and have a go at some exam practice. You must make sure that you know the percentages of the main gases in the atmosphere. We know that nitrogen, we say, is about 80%, it's actually 79.9 something, so we round it up. Oxygen is about 20%, and that leaves less than 1% of all the other gases. That includes your carbon dioxide, your water vapour, and your noble gases. Remember, things like the water vapour are going to change a lot depending on the weather systems and where you are, more than the nitrogen and oxygen levels. Okay, give yourself about 3 minutes to answer these questions. Try and do it without looking back at the information. Okay, grab your green pens and get ready for marking. So the majority of the Earth's atmosphere consists of two gases, so that's nitrogen and oxygen. It also asks for the proportion of the gases in the atmosphere, so we're going to go, it's about 80% for nitrogen and it's about 20% for oxygen. Then we go on to two other gases, so we can have any two gases that aren't nitrogen and oxygen that you'll find in the air, so carbon dioxide, water vapour, or any noble gas, so any of the inert gases, so any in group 0. So this is a quick bit of graph practice. I want you to get used to realizing that you can understand the graph even if there's things on axes that you don't really understand. So we're looking here on the y-axis, it's about the percentage of mass in dry air. So that's just air with the water vapor removed. So you know straight away there's no water vapor here, but then looking at the percentages, reading the values, none of those bars would be about the height that you would expect for water vapor. So gas A, we're looking up here, and it's about 78% according to this, so that makes it the nitrogen, whereas gas B is just over 20%, so that makes it the oxygen. So we're looking at the Earth's early atmosphere, so that's before life has evolved. So in the very early stages of the Earth, it was covered in volcanoes that were very active. These volcanoes released carbon dioxide, nitrogen and water vapour. They also released some methane and some ammonia. Now, this water vapour would then condense to form the seas, and then which enabled some of the carbon dioxide to dissolve into the water, reducing the carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere. Also, the rock cycle is going on like crazy. We are making carbonate rocks, and carbonates contain CO3. So that CO3 is coming from carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So it's another way that we are removing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and locking it up into the rocks. So one of the questions you'll like to get on a science paper is asking you why scientists aren't fully convinced of a theory, or why they think of different theories, or why we can't accurately predict. And it always comes down to a lack of evidence. So in the case of question 1 here, we're looking at why it's difficult to predict the gases in the Earth's early atmosphere. So 1, we can't predict it because we're not really sure what went on, because we had limited evidence. And why is it that we have such limited evidence? It's because it occurred 4.6 billion years ago. On to the second question, and this is one of your extended response ones, so we're looking at your 6 markers. So in the first billion years of the Earth's atmosphere, the main gases were carbon dioxide and water vapour. So we've got carbon dioxide, we've also got water vapour. We need to explain how these gases were released into the atmosphere and then how they were removed. So we need to release and remove them from the Earth's early atmosphere. In the 6 smart question. It's about linking. Okay, so you need to be linking the gas, the release, and the removal all together in a sentence. You've got a command word of explain, so you need to be saying why something happens. Okay, so you just need to have a sentence about carbon dioxide and a sentence about the water vapor, how it was released, how it's removed. Okay, so time yourself, give yourself 4 minutes and have a go. Okay, so green pen your answer. So we're going to start by looking at the water vapor. So the water vapor was released from volcanoes. Then it was condensed to form the oceans. Moving on to the carbon dioxide. This was released from volcanoes. And then some would dissolve into the oceans. And some of it was locked up in the formation of sedimentary rocks. So the key thing to note here is I've spoken about a gas, I've spoken where it's released from, I've then gone on to say what happened to it, and it's linked into a nice sentence. So that scores your high marks. It's that linking that gets you the high marks, not the number of points you make. So this is a straightforward question you should easily be able to do. We've got lots of information on the atmosphere in the Earth today and the atmosphere in Venus. So the question, we've got to remember to read above the actual question and the information. There are many ideas about the formation of the Earth and its atmosphere from a molten ball of rock and minerals. One idea is that the Earth's early atmosphere and average surface temperature were probably like that of Venus today. And then we've got the table with the information. There is a variable amount of water vapor in both atmospheres. How was the Earth's early atmosphere formed? You should now know that it's from volcanoes. And then the second part, the Earth's average surface temperature decreased over time. At what temperature would oceans have started to form? So this is actually checking your knowledge of some basic science and things that you should know. You should know the melting point or the freezing point of water, and that's 0 degrees C. And then we have the boiling point is 100 degrees C. So question, at what temperature would oceans have started to form? It was hot, it started to cool, and once it gets to 100 degrees, it would then start to condense. So the boiling point and the condensing point are at the same temperature. So now we're looking at how oxygen appeared in the atmosphere. So we're looking at 2.7 billion years ago. This is when life evolved on Earth. And we're talking first of all about algae and plants. Algae are very simple photosynthetic organisms. So the algae and the plants would start the photosynthesis, which involved taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere along with some water to produce glucose and oxygen. The glucose is the product that they want, and the oxygen is a waste product, and that is released. Okay, so it's a waste product that's released into the atmosphere. So once we've got the photosynthesis happening, the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will decrease and the oxygen in the atmosphere increases. And then the oxygen in the atmosphere increased sufficiently to allow the evolution of animal life. Now, as a higher student, you must know the word equation and the symbol equation. So we've got the symbol equation here, and remember it's evil because it's 6, 6, 6. Okay, give yourself a couple of minutes to answer these questions, and again, do it without looking back. Okay then, time to green pen. Organisms producing oxygen in the early atmosphere, it's 2 marks, so plants will get you 1 mark and algae will get you the second. On the question 2, we want a balanced symbol equation. If you've written a word equation, there are no points. So, balanced symbol equation, we've got carbon dioxide plus water goes to glucose plus oxygen. Now you'll get a mark for having the products right, which is C6H12O6 plus O2. Your numbers must be subscript, and you'll get a point for getting your reactants right, CO2 plus H2O. Make it very, very clear where your capital letters are. Okay, so your O needs to be a capital letter and your C needs to be a capital letter. Do not give the examiner any chance to think you've written cobalt, which is a big C and a small O. You will not score any points for that. And then the third mark comes from the balancing. So we put our big 6s in the front. Okay, time to practice a 6-mark question. These questions come up a lot in our exams. So we're looking here, our commands are to describe and explain. So describe is what has happened, explain is why it has happened. So we've got to know what went on and why. So we're looking at how the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has decreased over the last 2.7 billion years. So that 2.7 billion years, it's telling you that that's since the evolution of plants. Okay, so I want you to give yourself a few minutes to formulate your answer, write it in a couple, 2 to 3 very precise sentences, remembering to link the what and the why. So if we're ready to green pen, here we go. So first of all, what happened is the algae and plants removed carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. Okay, and we also had some carbon dioxide removed in the formation of fossil fuels. And also what's still going on is that rock cycle. So we've got some carbon being locked up in sedimentary rocks. Okay, so we also need to look a little bit at the greenhouse effect. Now, before we go any further, I want to point out that nowhere on this slide does it say the word ozone. So the ozone layer has absolutely nothing to do with greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect and climate change. It's a common misconception, but you don't need to know about the ozone layer. Do not write about the ozone layer. So we have greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So these are gases that increase concentration in the atmosphere is having an impact on our climate. So we've got carbon dioxide and water vapor, and these two are released through the combustion of fossil fuels, whereas methane is mainly released from cows. So we've got rid of a lot of forests to make pasture for cows, and then straight away we haven't got the trees to take away the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere anymore, and now we've got loads of creatures that add methane. So as higher students, you need to be able to describe this greenhouse effect. Okay, so what happens, the main points are infrared waves from the sun, so we've got a little sun here, come down to Earth. So when infrared waves hit something, they heat up that object that they hit. So the Earth gets warmer, it's a warm object, all warm objects then emit infrared radiation. So the infrared waves come down, heat up the Earth, and then they are released. The problem is that the wavelength of the waves coming down is different to the wavelength of the waves being emitted. Okay, so these wavelengths of infrared that are emitted are longer than the wavelengths that are being received, and those longer wavelengths get trapped by the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So we get shorter wavelengths coming down, heat up the Earth releases a longer wavelength which can't escape the atmosphere, and the heat stays trapped around the Earth. So time for you to have a quick go at applying this knowledge. I want to just point out for question 2 that it's a describe word. So want to know what is going on with those wavelengths, what wavelengths are coming into the Earth, what ones are being released again. So I reckon probably 3 to 4 minutes you should be able to answer these. Off you go. Okay, time to green pen. So 2 greenhouse gases, you need any 2 from carbon dioxide, water vapor, and methane. Doesn't matter which 2. And then we go on to describe the greenhouse effect. So we've got shorter infrared or actually visible light will happen as well, is absorbed by the Earth and then emitted as a longer wavelength. And absorbed by the greenhouse gases. So as I said before, we're looking at causes of this climate change. So we've got the human activities where we're burning fossil fuels which are releasing carbon dioxide and water vapor, and we're also removing forests. So deforestation, we're taking away the forests, we're taking away the trees that naturally take in and reduce that carbon dioxide. And then we have other problems in that we're clearing areas of land to have livestock, so these cows, and those cows release a lot of methane. And also landfills. So landfills are areas or tips where we go and dump our rubbish, and as that decomposes, that can also release a lot of methane. So what evidence do we have? Well, we've looked at peer-reviewed evidence. That means other scientists have looked at the evidence and the interpretation of the evidence and agree with it. So many of them believe that these human activities are causing the temperature of the Earth to increase, but it's really difficult to model. It's quite a complex system involving all of our weather systems, and so we tend to have simplified models, and that can lead to speculation and opinions that may be biased. You need to know some of the effects of climate change. So we are seeing increasing causes of flooding, so we've got sea levels rising, but then on the other scale we've got areas of drought where there's very little rainfall, and that can lead to desertification, so where whole areas become deserts with very limited rainfall and very limited lives. And of course we all know about the plights of the polar bears with their ice caps melting, and then we don't have the habitats for things like the polar bears. And actually last week the Arctic Circle reached 30 degrees C, so that's really, really warm for the Arctic Circle, and that's down to this climate change going on and our increasing greenhouse gases. There is a term that you need to know about, which is a carbon footprint, and that's the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases emitted over the life cycle of something. So it could be a product, so something that you use, you have your own carbon footprint, how much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are emitted because of all the things that you will use in your life. Okay, so we look at ways to reduce our carbon footprint, ways that we can plant trees to offset any carbon dioxide that we are adding through our use of fossil fuels. So here are a couple of questions for you to apply that knowledge to. So 3 minutes, off you go. Okay, time to green pen. So we need ways in which human activities increase the amount of carbon dioxide and methane, and so for carbon dioxide, you can have burning fossil fuels, or you could have deforestation. For methane, you can have farming, livestock, so that's cows or pigs, or you could have landfills. And then for number 2, describe 2 potential effects of global climate change. Any 2 from flooding, rising sea level, droughts, melting ice caps, and desertification. More questions for you to try. Carbon footprint, now this is going to be a definition you need to learn. So if you're a flashcard person, this is brilliant to flashcard. On to the second question, we're going to be looking at electric cars, and here you're going to be balancing how they can reduce carbon dioxide, but at the same time they may not reduce carbon dioxide. So you are presenting both sections of the argument. This is the type of question you will get at a higher level. Okay, so give yourself 5 minutes, off you go. Okay, green pen time. So carbon footprint, that's the total amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases given off by a product a service or event. Okay, on to question 2. We're looking at electric cars. So the electric cars, when you're running them, if they're running on a battery, are not releasing carbon dioxide. So we've got the idea that they're not burning those fossil fuels, so we are not releasing the carbon dioxide. But you've got a battery that will have been charged, and so the electricity that is used to charge that battery may have come from a power station that burns fossil fuel. Okay. So put a nice linking word in of however. Lastly, we need to look at the pollutants that are being released into our atmosphere, and these are mainly produced during combustion. So we have different types of combustion. We've got complete combustion and incomplete combustion. So in incomplete combustion, the burning of the carbon isn't complete. So we get carbon monoxide, which is a toxic gas. It's colourless and it's a silent killer. We also get little tiny bits of carbon that aren't burnt, and this makes soot or the particulates. It's another name, it's a more scientific name. When we burn fuels completely, we make carbon dioxide. Okay, but within these fossil fuels that we are burning, there are impurities. So some of these fuels, especially coal, is going to have things like sulfur in there. So that sulfur, when we burn it, will react with oxygen to make sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen, if you have a high enough temperature, so this is happening inside car engines, the nitrogen will react with oxygen to make nitrogen oxides. There is more than one type of nitrogen oxide, and all of them can be made. So you need to know why these pollutants are bad. So I'm going to go through each one of them now. Carbon monoxide, this one is a toxic gas. And what actually happens is as you breathe it in, the carbon monoxide will join onto your hemoglobin, preventing any oxygen attaching to that hemoglobin. So your red blood cells will carry around carbon monoxide around your body rather than oxygen, and then your cells will be deprived of the oxygen that they need for respiration. It's colourless, it's odourless, it's called the silent killer. So if you're exposed to it, you get a bit of a headache, you feel a bit sleepy, and then you don't wake up. Sulfur dioxide, and the nitrogen oxides, these can cause respiratory problems, and also they can dissolve in rain to make acid rain. So it's when the sulfur dioxide or the nitrogen oxides dissolve into the rainwater, as that precipitate falls, it falls as acid rain. Lastly, we've got the particulates, the bits of soot, those little dark specks. So if you obviously are breathing those in, they can cause problems with your lungs, and it can be a problem for asthmatics, along with nitrogen oxides. These can be problems for asthmatics too. So back to the particulates, they can cause global dimming. So if you imagine you've got a lot of soot in the air, it's going to block out the sun, and so it's going to be a lot darker. Okay, so we've got another couple of questions for you to apply some knowledge to. All I'm going to do to guide you here is just point out for question 1, we've got to describe and explain. So we need to know what and we need to know why. And question 2, we've got to describe, so we need to know what. Okay, so this is going to be on the, question 1 is going to be on the lines of a 6 marker. And question 2 will be just a couple of sentences. I would go for a sentence for each of the pollutants mentioned. 7 minutes, off you go. Okay, so it's time to green pen. Question 1, we're going to work through each gas or each pollutant individually. So to start with, carbon monoxide. Is produced when a carbon fuel is burnt in limited oxygen, or the idea there isn't enough oxygen. Okay. So you're going to get a mark for carbon monoxide is produced from a carbon fuel, and another mark for the idea that it has a limited oxygen. So moving on to sulfur dioxide. Sulfur is an impurity. And it reacts with oxygen to make sulfur dioxide. And then lastly, particulates. Are solid, unburnt carbon fuels, or carbon. So I've got the gas and how it's produced for each one. And then going on to question 2, problems caused by carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide and particulates. So carbon monoxide, that's toxic or poisonous. Sulfur dioxide, causes acid rain or respiratory problems. And then the particulates, they can cause global dimming and health problems. Lastly, there are some recall questions just to go over the content from today. So have a go at these 10 questions and then use the answers on the next slide to green pen your work. Hope this has been useful and stay safe.